Preview click. Why won't that give me that thing? Suck. Oh, that is not good. That's tiny, and no one can read it on my screen. Figure it's worth chatting about the XDS stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw that.
Well, I can at least catch you up on
Yeah, I figured do some
what I've been
updates.
working on over the past month. Like you want me to start now? Right? Yes, we're actually in the meeting.
It's all good. It's first thing in the morning for me, so
Mhm.
I'm just throwing stuff down.
Yeah, we've mostly been working on adding in XDS to Quilkin itself. Where we've been trying to deploy it in our infrastructure and like been fixing all the bugs that have cropped up. We're nearly there with it. We're just adding in the reflector change for the Kubernetes stuff. I believe you mentioned that earlier, Mark.
I did. I saw you read it.
Once that is fixed, we're going to try to deploy, and hopefully there's no bugs this time and it all works. And then like all the XDS stuff works right now. There just seems to be like listing that service just regularly seems to not always return all of the results. So we're thinking maybe it's just because we haven't set the watch. So we're going to see if that fixes it. Otherwise, investigate whatever the other bug that's causing that is. Also I meant to post in the PR, but like I'll also once that's done, I'm going to split out some of it. There's another partial bit that can be taken out and like reviewed on its own, but then the rest of it needs to all be reviewed as one piece, because like there's the main sort of change that's come along with it is like reducing the configuration change overhead. So we have had, currently in Quilkin, we have a lot of different structures for like updating like a different component of Quilkin and managing all of that. This PR changes that so that essentially the config struct is essentially the one single place where all of that state is both stored and like where you can get like a snapshot of it as well. So like they're no longer like two different things that happen in the code base. It's like you just access config, and like you can also just deserialize and serialize your own configs. So that's like a big change, and that's what and the reason why I can't split it up more is because like the new XDS server and client that now use that, I would have to like pull one out and then write in support for the other component in order to be able to merge them separately, and that's just like I don't think that's worth it.
Got it.
Aside from like, I think it's a really nice change. It like makes it a lot more convenient. Actually, like it's the main reason we actually lose code rather than actually add code with this feature is just a reduction in like having to send things through channels and a whole bunch of like queue stuff that isn't necessary anymore.
Sweet. Actually, that sounds great. I'm very excited about this. Pretty awesome. Once we'll talk about my woes of port reuse stuff. But once I think I have an idea maybe on how to get through that. But I'll start writing the harness for the end-to-end tests, so we can do some end-to-end tests on the system. I've got some. I don't think that's
yeah. That definitely be very helpful, because that is like one of the like slower iteration time things for testing this stuff out. Is like I have to make the change and then we have to deploy the image and then we have to deploy the whole thing.
And I'm sure that's
definitely be great to get end-to-end Agonis tests.
I didn't think this port reuse stuff was going to take me so long, but apparently there's just a weird issue in it that I'm struggling to work out. No, that makes sense. No, that'll be next on my agenda.
I guess that's all of us struggling with weird issues then. Like the same reason that the Kubernetes stuff is taking a while is because weird issues with list. So
yeah, I've got the port reuse thing. like just with the binary standing alone seems to be working fine. It's like when I'm running the integration tests, sometimes like if I have like a socket that I'm using for a test, like to send a packet and then see if one comes back or whatever, when I send the packet, nothing happens. And if I retry, I'm like, oh, maybe like Quilkin hasn't started yet. I'll retry. Nope. I can let it sit there for a minute, do nothing. But if I have another system, like I like fire up Netcat or something, and then fire the packet into Quilkin on the port that now it's running on, it's received. The only thing I've seen that seems to work, which I have in the unit tests, is I like recreate a whole entire socket again and then send it from that. And like if I have that there in a retry, it works even though it never actually retries. I'm extremely confused.
Yeah, I'd have to look into it more, but like the only time I ran into something kind of similar running the XA stuff was like I accidentally set like I missed one of the ports for the client because like one of the hard difficult things, not really difficult, just slightly annoying, is like nothing is like a good default state for Quilkin, like doing nothing and like receiving nothing, because UDP is like stateless. So it can be very difficult. Like if you're just like have one thing misconfigured, like everything just sort of stops and is waiting, and it's like that's a good scenario. Like, that's
yeah. But this is the weird thing, right? Like 9 times out of 10, the test will pass. It's no problem. It's that one time out of 10 that, like, come on, like what is going on? So I had one thought about previously, like all the stuff we have now, like it generally just works. I have a feeling I just had this weird feeling that like with the standard sockets, once it's bound, it can receive, and so it'll like, because it gets bound early, like by the time you've gone through and run Quilkin, like it's bound on that port. Whereas I think with the way this is now, it's not necessarily receiving straight away, but it doesn't make sense why a retry doesn't work. The only other thought I had was basically setting up a little toolkit that was like, just make sure that like packets can go from one point to another, like from a sender to receiver. And once you know that you can do that, then you can run your tests because you know the things are working as they're supposed to, and then you can run through. So I'm gonna try that. That's my next. It's a bit of a band-aid, but at least it gets us through. Yeah, I have a bunch of refactoring stuff in there too, with like some of the test stuff, like a little toolkit in there for so you don't have to like try and find a unique port to run an integration test on. Like it just, you know.
I think I also added that exact utility into my
okay,
PR.
then whichever one gets to it first.
I think I don't know how you do it. Mine is literally just like it binds a random port on a random address, gives you the port, and then drops that socket so that it knows. Okay, this
that works.
Previously,
I think I just picked a port to
way.
start from, and then like every time you requested it, we just increment a global value and just run it forward.
I think I would definitely try like take my function and try, because that was literally the function that saved me from this issue, was like doing it so that it was always a random socket and just like taking me out of the equation entirely of like trying to line up all the ports and stuff.
Good idea.
Is
that in there now?
Or it's like 3 lines. I can send it to you, even if it is in there, but if not, I can just send it to you. It's like 3 lines.
Or I can get like I'm guessing you like start a socket to see if it's open, and if it's not open, then
you even just bind it, and then you just use the default like IP for unspecified and 0.
So
and then you're like, give me the port, and then you just drop. Or like in the function, you just return the port, and that also drops the socket.
We drop the socket, yeah. And I'm guessing, if it fails, then
I feel like that would be an impossible situation, because like
that is fair if it's an ephemeral port. Yeah.
Like you get the ephemeral port, and then literally like a millisecond later, it's also been bound again.
Yep.
It's technically not impossible, but someone's trying at that point.
But at least if you're creating a socket, like like you're like, okay, this thing died.
Yeah.
It's a good idea, actually. Let me write that down. All right, I'm gonna actually check that in the issue. That's another good idea. Try.
One other thing that was implemented in the XS that I mentioned was just configuration change from flat list of endpoints to just actually specifying the cluster configuration in the thing, because we were just doing a bunch of conversion from like, okay, well, we have a flat list of endpoints, then we convert it to a cluster, and then it's okay, we receive this cluster, and then we convert it to a flat list of endpoints. And it was just like way more sense to just let you define a cluster, and then we just send the cluster back and forth without having to do too much copying and like flattening of lists and stuff. Also, so another should mention before, it was like we were doing as part of like trying to deploy Quilkin more, we were like I was also trying to do more like dashboard stuff, and it's like I wonder if like is there a way we can package like a good dashboard into Quilkin itself and like collaborate on the dashboards, because currently they're all like internal to us, but I was wondering.
So
can we...
so are you talking about like Grafana dashboards?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Grafana
So
dashboards.
in examples, there is some Grafana dashboards.
Oh, okay, cool. Just check the examples in the repository.
I think that's the one we ported originally.
Oh, it is.
But we converted it to Graphonet and have been building on it from there. But I know that we are actually already started to use tooling that uses plain JSON, if that is what the example dashboard is in, and then we can just use that one upstream and apply that one.
I mean, maybe Quilkin uses Graphonet or something, like, you know, I don't know if like managing doing the thing entirely in JSON. Good.
The main issue with using the JSON ones directly is that you can be really tempted to just copy the output from Grafana, right? Because it is JSON, and the output is super version specific, and it's going to completely change based on your Grafana version, which is kind of annoying. It means someone else can't easily just use it, especially on older versions, which is kind of sucky. It's where Graphonet is nice. Where
this is what we have now. We just like a YAML file, because I literally just copied how we did it in Agonis. We've run this in Agonis over multiple Grafana versions, like just like you can't read that because that's tiny. Where it's just stored in like the JSON file, and we just have multiple YAML files and stuff. I mean, it's not pretty.
It looks
that
like
will
just
work
output.
That will work in all Grafana versions that are higher than the one you used, right? But
yes.
It won't work in all Grafana versions that are lower than the one you used. We always keep up to date to the very latest Grafana. So if we export our Grafana output, it'll work on latest at that time, and only on latest at that time. Which is not great, right?
Yeah.
But I think we're complicating it. Like we can just not export it, but use this one instead. And when we do changes, just add what we need and apply that instead of converting it to Graphonet. So I think at least we can look into that to port back if there's anything added that you didn't, Erin.
Anytime we've updated our Grafana dashboards on Agonis, I don't know if anyone's actually using them, but no one has complained about version incompatibilities. So
okay, good to know. Or otherwise, like Simon said, we can just build the JSON one and dump the JSON output of that in the thing, right? That'll work fine. That's pretty backwards compatible because Graphonet actually goes out of its way to be.
What is that? What are you using?
A thing called Graphonet. It's a JSON generator for Grafana for that JSON that you just showed us. Graphonet.
JSON, it's like JSONet, like JSONnet. Yeah.
Oh.
Graphonet is a Grafana generator for JSONnet, and JSONnet is a JSON generator built by Google.
I assume it's that.
Yep.
It's not great, but at least provides a simplest of backwards compatibility because it actually generates.
It's also, in my opinion, it's a lot more readable than plain JSON. Like it's like, oh hey, I'm declaring a dashboard and then this component and stuff. It makes way more sense.
Way of running Grafana dashboards and start generating JSON files and maintaining them. You can create your own dashboard using the many help with Graph. Oh, okay, so you.
I think isn't it just like libsonet functions that you call?
Yeah,
so you have
Things you learn. Oh, I see.
Yeah, you can see on the example page, it's actually pretty readable and easy to manipulate.
Oh yeah, I would not be writing Grafana JSON by hand.
Yeah, I'm gonna question the pretty readable a little bit because I'm gonna be honest. I hate writing that crap.
Yeah.
It's definitely more readable in a diff than just the straight up Grafana JSON, which is just
it's more semantically meaningful.
Yeah, interesting. I guess the nice thing about the way we have the dashboards right now is they're super easy to install for anyone. Like they're just like dump the YAML in and be done.
There are solutions to that, right? Like you could run JSON.NET for each release and attach them to the release or a bunch of other things.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Put them in the zip or like a bunch of different ways. That's what.
Yeah, I'm easy.
I'm fine for now. Just pasting the Grafana. Like we have JSON.NET and Grafana internally right now. We can just run the thing and get the JSON output instead and paste that.
Paste that in the thing.
That's fine initially, and we can worry about this later.
Yeah, if we want to get more fancy with it, like we could, have Grafana installed in the Docker file that spits stuff out. Like I don't know, like tools.
Right, we could probably actually like if you want like think about like productize it or something like if we could just put it in the Quilkin binary or something so that you could run like Quilkin install Grafana dashboards and then it would just install it onto your instance.
I don't think that's a good idea at all. Like, no, please let's not start embedding the Grafana API. Like, people can do that themselves. Please, no. There's like 6 different ways to install Grafana dashboards into Grafana. For this is your API. You can mount it into a config map.
Yeah.
You can put it into files and mount it into a local directory, depending on how you're actually running the damn thing and what versions you're using.
Yeah.
So I really rather not want Quilkin to have an opinion on those things.
Yeah, I went with what Agonas did, which is like putting in a config map because it's if you want the JSON, you can just grab it out of the YAML file without too much difficulty. It seemed like a happy medium, but I also don't have strong opinions and I don't do a lot of the stuff, so I just wanted some dashboards so that I could show them doing presentation demos.
Yeah, I want to add more dashboards, but I was like, I don't know where to put these and like how to do them even, like because I just mostly I actually just edit them in the dashboard thing most of the time because it's a visual tool and that's pretty handy for graphs.
No, that's what I do too. If you want to add like another page, well, so if you basically my workflow is I grab I do the edits and then I export the JSON and I just replace it in here for that particular dash and then just have a separate YAML file for each dash, like actual board. And you can just copy the pattern.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then it's actually like if people want to just test it out, you can literally just go kubectl apply on the folder and it just loads it into Grafana. Works out pretty well. Cool. Anything else that immediately jumps out to me? Oh, did you want to talk about that upstream address issue?
I think the only thing I have is like I kind of agree with what you said, where it's like I need to look into this more. It's like I think I want to go read like how RTP works or whatever, and like see what like a good solution would be for the thing. I think that's my opinion. Is like need more information.
That works. Excuse me, we didn't end up getting a response on that either. It is an interesting problem in that like they would want to know what the sending addresses are going to be ahead of time, but that kind of stuff is dynamic, so it I don't know. But I wouldn't be shocked if at some point someone's like, we want to have like the sending address be from like this range forward, from like 8,000 forward or something, so that we can do firewall rules or whatever. I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah, we probably just need to have like a way to handle like overflow or something. Like, oh well, actually, this kind of actually, that you mentioned this, that does actually bring up another issue I wrote a while back, because when I was doing these XDS stuff, like another one of these idiosyncrasies of like endpoints too cluster to endpoints was that in the XDS, how that works is like they have a listener discovery service for discovering listeners, and like in Envoy you have like one process, but one process can hold multiple listeners. But in Quilkin, we're currently designed that we have one process, one listener.
Right.
So some of that stuff you mentioned there.
Isn't that more of an artifact of how UDP versus TCP works? Like for TCP, you need a listener per connection, right? UDP doesn't have the concept of a connection. You're just receiving packets.
We have an idea of a session, sort of, but yeah.
So we'll have listeners in sessions where I still have multiple listeners. But I don't think you actually need more than one for all of your sessions. At least you shouldn't. I don't see why you would.
Yeah. That's what I was just asking. It's like, do we want, like, because again, in their protocol, we're always going to get like a multiple list because it's going to be sending one or many listeners. So it's like, do we actually want to fit in with that use case and like be more XDS compatible, or do we just want to continue doing our own thing and like have our XDS be like, okay, well, you can call this XDS, but it has to be one,
I think one's fine until we find a reason to support more than one. Like when we do, sure. Until we do,
yeah. I think the only no, actually, I can't even come. I'm just trying to think of like a.
I gotta run, folks. So I'll see you around.
Yeah.
The thing I was just going to say was it like comes up for that RTP case where like you could just have like one listener per one session per listener, and then you'd have multiple listeners in a single process.
Wouldn't they have the same issue? Because if you had like you would define multiple listeners, which would have multiple incoming ports.
Yes,
each listener would have a sending, like a receiving port and a sending port.
Yeah, I mean, with your changes, you could actually just have multiple listeners on the same port, couldn't you? Like with the changes to allow UDP to reuse the same port.
But then what does multiple listeners give you that solves things for RTP?
Yeah, I think they think about it more.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea though.
Yeah,
because I think we have multiple. Well, we have multiple workers that listen on the same port with the change. Which is
it is kind of how we do it, but it's kind of like we do it like one level beneath rather than like having multiple listeners. It's like the listener has multiple like subtasks of workers that are just essentially doing the same job, but it's all defined within one listener.
Oh, one thing I was going to bring up, I did a preliminary like bottle performance test, which I had to run multiple times because sometimes it fails because of race conditions I've had. Didn't see a huge performance increase. So like a little bit. But I'm also aware of the fact that a performance tester like single threaded running like just
I think
for it rather than more. But the
Yeah,
flip side of
I
that
think
is
we need to
it
get
allows me
some-
to remove a ton of code.
What's it called? Thread per core stuff. Like I think that's where I'd be interested to see like how this compares and like stuff like I don't know if you've seen like Gloom.io and stuff like different. They're like different runtimes that are based on like the idea of like thread per core and stuff for this and like what's that new IO interface? Not that new, but it's the async one.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about, and I've totally blanked on
In
what it
Linux,
is. I know what
like
you're
is
talking
it
about.
way better for that, and like they have support for that out of the box for reading in, like from sockets and stuff like that.
Yep, I think you've created a thread on it too.
And that's where like I believe this came from. Was I'd be interested to see like if we did in a multi-thread, how much, if there is any performance gain, or if it is just code reuse. But
the one thing it definitely did was made like I could remove a lot of that code because there's all that code around like sticking stuff in a queue and pulling it back out and putting it like passing it to worker, and it all just goes away, which is actually just very nice anyway.
It makes it way more like TCP, where you can just cheaply clone it and have read-only things for it.
No, it works that way too. So assuming I can get it all working properly, it is, I think, a net positive anyway. But once I get it working, I'll start pulling it apart too. I think there's some chunks I can yoink out, make it a bit easier to review as well. It's not too big right now, but all right.
That's all I had.
I think that's all I have too. I'm just having a quick look through PRs and some of the more recent issues. Crosses being a pain. I see that.
This is not but like on top of like new tools like Grafana or whatever, a tool that I've been using that I've just been really enjoying, like we're talking about like doing this make stuff and like having to do cross for all this cross compilation and stuff. One tool that I found interesting is that Earthly. I've mentioned it before to like Resident Simon is like it's described Well, I got it from Simon actually, but it's described as like a makefile plus a Docker file had a baby, which probably the best description of it is literally just
Ooh.
like make commands, but like each command is like a Docker
That's
layer. Yep.
Yeah.
It sounds like kind of like cloud build but local.
Yeah, like I haven't mentioned it before because all their previous releases are BSL, so that's not allowed on Google. But their next release is going to be MPL, so that will actually be able to be used like in a project like this. Essentially, this is like the benefit of this is like it has everything runs in Docker, so like it's more reproducible and stuff. It's not running a make, and like you can just very easily at the end say save artifact as this, or just save image, and you just have a Docker image ready to go.
That's pretty cool.
But you get this working for Quilkin, right?
We didn't get it working for the deployment, but that was just because I had an ARM machine, so I built an ARM image.
Yeah,
and
right,
tried to deploy that on an x86 machine.
That is a whole.
And then I didn't spend. I just didn't want to spend the time writing the cross-platform code that they have here. They do have
theory is the make and Docker stuff should just work because it's all running inside a container and it'll sure be the same. And I don't understand why it's not. That drives me up the wall.
They do have some stuff for like cross compilation and stuff, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
I mean, I've been looking into this a bit, and it seems to be a purely cross issue. There is this upstream issue. I don't really know. We only see it on WSL.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
And WSL, we're already in a weird state where we run the Docker daemon in Windows and mount that into WSL, and then you run Docker in WSL. It's
right.
Basically, yeah, surprising that it even works. Slightly. No, but jokes aside. So, I mean, I actually had a problem building on Windows as well, but that seems to have been just me doing weird stuff. So that works now. So we have a way forward. Because other than that, I'm also on, other than that, I'm also on a RM Mac, so I can build on that. And WSL doesn't work. The upstream issue in Cross, that they seem to only mention issues with NixOS. I haven't seen anyone else have issues outside of that. But I did some testing, like I wrote in the ticket where I just created a new Ubuntu install, and that works. Yeah, and both in vanilla Ubuntu and Docker in Ubuntu, and everything works on my Manjaro machine as well. So I mean, it must be a WSL thing.
So was the WSL stuff working or not working?
Not working.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't think we ever had it working because the initial builds we did together, me and Aaron, I think we just did with Cargo instead of Cross.
Oh, okay, so when you say you can build with Cross on Docker and Docker from Windows, you mean from outside of WSL, like PowerShell?
Yeah, Git Bash.
Like
yeah.
Got it. What a nightmare.
So yeah, I'm also very like not too familiar with cross compilation. So I don't know.
We went down that path to just be like, how do we get this stuff to work, especially like everywhere else, because it's super easy. The thing I did find, I checked it on here. There's M1 users, like how are you cross compiling? It seems like that's a common problem. Yeah, we're having lots of fun on like Agones with like a lot of M1 users who are like, no, all the dev tools don't work because it's trying to pull down ARM images, and like we only have a couple of those. This sucks.
We have a big tracking issue for like, oh, well, this doesn't work. We can't like build this entirely natively yet because this one tool in Bazel doesn't support ARM yet.
Yeah, so I think that's M1 Macs are a mood at the moment. I don't know how you're going with them. It's been even more fun in that like I don't have access to an ARM machine. So it's very hard.
I know for me it's just been like, I'm on ARM. Why is everyone else still on x86? So
yeah, to be fair, at this point, I think most things work usually, at least if you live in the RM world. But I'm curious, like, could we get along with just using Cargo instead of Cross until we have something else? Because right now,
do you know, I didn't actually realize you could do Cargo build -- target.
I think like Cross should only be needed for like platforms where like a standard library is not available. That's usually where
Yeah,
you need
or
it.
like compiling C or C++ type like C code.
Yeah.
I don't know. The interesting question is, do we have any of that? And I don't know if the answer is yes.
Don't think so.
I don't.
No, like I said,
I think the only C
actually.
code we have is the OpenSSL library, and I believe we vendor that, so it's just all compiled up into one thing.
That is true, because it's
yeah.
a nightmare otherwise. But something will need to compile that for, like, we'll need a GCC library for each target.
Yes.
So we might actually need cross.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I think that's handled by the build script. I think the OpenSSL build script handles that for you. As long as it's there, as long as the environment variables are populated, it should just work.
We should.
Yeah, like I said, I know that
try.
we built with Cargo the test we did for the new XDS server. So I mean, as long as that's not the reason why it's not working, no, just sites. I mean, we can get a build.
Yeah, that's what I say. I was thinking about it. I think. Meeting.
The annoying thing is that it feels like it's something silly, like just an environment setup, given
right?
the kind of issue. It should be easy to track down, but I haven't gotten into reading any code from Cross itself. I'm just trying to reproduce this.
And it seems like Cross is not the most well-maintained thing in the world either.
No.
Yeah, that's
yeah, which is a whole other move.
It's been around for quite a while, so like it's like changed the hands a few times, I think, maybe. Yeah, as long as we're only supporting like tier 1 Rust, we should be able to get away with just Cargo for cross compilation.
I did find one of the reasons that the build fails on right now, which I just haven't worried about on the port reuse, the port address stuff, is that there's certain socket RPIs that are not available on Windows. So when it's trying to compile Windows, they're missing. So I just need to write some featured methods for that.
Yeah. That's about where I got with that thing. I was kind of like, I'll come back to it later, and then I never come back to it.
I was like, I'm gonna get these tests to pass. Once I get those to pass, then I will like come back and fix that, because that's not the end of the world. That's easy enough. All right, I made a note on that. That's a good idea. Yeah, no, 100%. If we can get rid of cross, and that'll simplify our whole build process so much better, and it'll be nice too, and it'll actually probably go faster because it'll reuse a bunch of stuff locally that's there, and yada yada yada, and it'll just be all good. That all sounds good. Yeah. Okay. But actually it. We say this every time. We're like, we're done, and then there's something else.
That's it for me.
Work on. Oh, actually, I do have something else that I thought of. I was just gonna not super important, but I'm trying to remember. We output like a debug and then a release of Quilkin. I think some of that choice was because before the logging we were using was the debug one would have all the debug output, and the release one wouldn't have it because it would get compiled out. I don't think that's the case anymore, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think everything
probably reduce that to a single binary.
It's dependent more on what the Rust log variable is set to.
Yeah,
and just always dependent on that.
I think you can overwrite that with an environment variable and stuff too. I don't think we have any reason to have a debug binary anymore, do we?
Not like distributed, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you might want that like for a quick build, like if you want to quickly test the entire make process, like that's where you'd want it. Because debug build is way faster. But that's the only use case I would say. It's like it's a faster build.
There, I might
like you might want, for example, in PRCD to run the debug build, and then in like push CD, like when it's a release, then run the release build. Because that would reduce CI times by a bit, and then for the actual release, we would only release the release version.
Can I do what I want in here? I wanted to add a task. No, that's not going to let me do it. That seems like a thing. All right. Just, I'll write a thing. We're doing it. Cool. All right. No, actually, I'm done now. I promise.
Okay. Well, then with that, see you next month.
Wonderful.
Rest of you tomorrow.
Cool.
Goodbye.
Catch you later.
Actually,
One see us tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's
holidays.
bank holiday.
Enjoy.
See you next week.
Thanks.
Catch you
All right,
later.
see ya.
Later. Bye.
Bye.